You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. It's season 10. I'm George Cedarquist, joined by Oliver Camacho, Matt Cummings, Weston Williams, and Ashley Hardgrave. All right, this week, it is time for me to retire my number. That's right. It's my final episode as a co-host after 9 years on this podcast. The team will say their goodbyes and reminisce about the good times before I go to that big baseball diamond in the sky and take over my new role as executive producer.
Yeah, from the owner's box.
Then it's a free throw from Javier Camarena, who is set to make his lyric opera of Chicago debut as the Duke in Rigoletto. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, well, I would come back for one more episode as an encore, but Angela Gheorghiu might object. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, click follow, Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign, send us a voice memo, or email us your hot takes, mailbag at operaboxscore.com. Just record your thoughts using the You Got Something to Say tab on the website, operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you'll get an OBS beer coaster, an OBS lapel pin, and a #1 OBS fan foam finger just for sharing your own hot take. What a great show we have for you all this evening. Got a great crew. Oliver Camacho, great to see you.
It's great to be seen. A little bit sad today. And also, I'm still, I have a hangover, as Ashley might say.
Really?
From the U.S. Open, which was was sort of a disappointment. I'm not going to lie. Carlos Alcaraz left early. I think he had not yet gotten his footing post-Olympics after the tragic loss to Djokovic for the gold medal. And then Djokovic followed him and also exited early. So it made a mess of the bracket, and most of the matches in the final rounds were pretty one-sided, pretty lopsided. And Jannik Sinner handily won the title. Good for him. Even though there is some scandal about him being touched by his trainer who was using steroid cream on somebody else, and it seeped through his body twice. I don't know how that works. No. This is a real thing. Like, Jannik Sinner was almost suspended for testing positive for steroids because his trainer apparently forgot to wash his hands.
Sounds real to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Matt Cummings joining the show remotely this week. Weston Williams, there he is.
I'm so sad that you're leaving, George, because you have been the one sort of bulwark against this show becoming mostly tennis updates. And I will miss you when you're gone.
You need to rep the Southern football a little bit more, along with Ashley Hardgrave.
That was what I was going to say, George, is that I'm going to be left pretty much all alone to talk football on these shows now.
To yourself.
So just basically with myself. I will try to explain to the best of my abilities why it's important to Oliver and Weston. Weston will nod. Oliver will look off in the distance.
What was your big college football moment from last weekend?
You know, it's gotta be, if you're somewhere in the Midwest, all you're gonna hear about is the huge upset that Northern Illinois had against Notre Dame.
That is crazy.
America,
actually.
Yeah,
it's an absolutely crazy thing. But listeners, America, if you're out there and you need something to warm your heart, listen to the post-game interviews from Northern Illinois' head coach Thomas Hammock. He loves those kids. He believes in those kids. You will believe in those kids and be rooting for them all season long after you hear his interview.
It was a phenomenal game. I did catch the end of it. I did watch Michigan, Texas till the bitter end. Obviously, this is not the Michigan team of last year. I'm just so glad college football is back that I will watch Michigan lose a game just because I was so desperate. I'm so desperate to talk some opera.
Chalk Talk on Opera Box Score.
It's season 10 on the OBS. Oh my goodness.
Just in time for you to leave, bro.
I cannot believe, I honestly can't believe, first of all, that I have such a fabulous crew of you four doing this. It could not have happened
sometimes
without
Matt.
you. There were folks at the beginning, and I think back, 10 years ago, and in some fever dream, I was just like, I love sports, I love opera, and what's the connection between these two things? And what if we could talk about this art form that we know and love in a way that everybody could understand it and with the same passion that sports fans have, right? What if opera in this country became as ubiquitous and such a part of the culture like a baseball game that everybody can afford to go to a Major League Baseball game? Even in 2024, everybody can go to a baseball game. What if everybody could afford to go to an opera once a year? What if we could follow opera singers with the same fanaticism that we follow our sports legends? What if we could talk about the game with such statistics and insight as we do with our sports teams? What if we could have a radio show where people would call in like old time sports talk radio and rant and rave about what they were seeing, the stories that they were hearing? Well, we never quite made it to that last part. And I'm gonna start with that is when we started on WNUR, the radio station at Northwestern University,
held together with Scotch tape, by the way.
It really is.
Not an
exaggeration. It's still, yeah, those were the days, guys. Do you remember the days at WNUR in the studio?
Just barely.
I remember when I was recruited to be on the podcast explicitly because the infrastructure of the sound equipment was going to fall apart if you looked at it too hard. And Oliver was desperately seeking someone who could kind of talk about opera, but also like make sure that the buttons got pressed in the right way at the right time. Oh. And even then we still lost, the famous Jake Heggie episode every once in a while. But,
to be clear, you're tall enough and your wingspan is long enough that you can operate the board and hold up two different mics at the same time.
It was completely unmatched physical prowess that I was hired for.
There was a certain beauty of being in the WNUR studio. Like, we were all in the same room. We were really looking into each other's eyes. It was truly a living, breathing thing, right? Like, I will say that the show now, it's edited, but very, very lightly edited by Weston's dab hand. It really, what you hear is what you got from the studio. But it was so live and it was so fresh, even if we never quite got those phone calls. And of course, it started off with the likes of Giovanna Jacques, Tobias Wright. Later on, Dinah Fisher swapped out for Giovanna, and then Oliver joined in. The whole thing, Matt, Weston, Ashley, just it all makes sense all the time.
How does it feel 9 years later? Did you ever think that you would still be involved? And I will clarify to our listeners that you still will be involved behind the scenes as an executive producer, but did you ever think that 9 years later you would still be doing this wacky little podcast about opera and sports that you came up with, I assume just, bolt upright in your bed covered in sweat saying I have to do opera box score?
I think so. Yeah, I think so, because I think I'm a guy who just like legendary Michigan coach Bo Schembechler said, those who stay will be champions. I feel like, I'm a guy who starts something and really is about tenacity and longevity, but it's not really about me. It's about surrounding myself with really first-rate people who are almost better than I am and who almost who care as deeply as I do. and that's what this team is, really.
Well, not to toot our own horns, but we do put out a show every week, and we rarely put up an encore. And for those of you who are in the podcasting business, that it takes a lot of preparation and organization, and just you gotta be committed to the calendar. I don't know how these people who do Pod Save America, how they put out 3 shows a week. I mean, that's their full-time job, obviously, sure. And they're selling, cereal and mattresses and stuff like that. So I guess what I'm saying is we need a mattress sponsor.
Right. Which, yeah, Cariuma, if you want to make some kicks with us, by all means, we will make some sneakers.
I think it's that schedule that really kind of helped us go so long over the years, right? Was this thing, and it started again with WNUR. It's like, well, we got to be there on Monday night. So
Yeah.
we've got to
That's our
come
slot.
up. That's
when
our
all
slot.
those kids were finishing up with
I know.
whatever new age
it.
music. I don't know what music they were playing. I have no idea what they were playing.
Now, the pandemic was interesting, right? Because I remember those weeks in March of 2020, and we were all looking at each other and trying to figure out Zoom. And to your point, Weston, I was like, uh-oh, is this going to be the end of it? I remember taping a interview with Zach Finkelstein on a dreadful Zoom connection where, like,
Yeah.
I was trying to, like, feed one of my children dinner at the same time as, like, recording him, and, like, the internet was, and I'm thinking
The podcast has never sounded worse.
I was like, this is going to work. Well, then we did TDO, so it did in fact get worse.
Man.
But the Dallas
Those
Opera
were
Network
the days.
forced us to get our tech together in order to meet their standards. And, we all bought external mics, and some of us have mic stands. We all have mic stands, I think. And so,
We sure do.
yeah, I mean, just so you guys know, like in the early days, because I'm a fool that knows nothing about technology. I was using one of those Zoom recorders. It was like handheld Zoom recorders.
Same.
And recording the speaker of the Zoom call into the Zoom audio and using the other side. It was like 2-channel. So I was talking into one side, and the speaker, the output of my computer was the mix. So, if you go back and listen to episodes like 5 years ago and earlier, you were like, what is this?
Oh my, it's laughable.
Why do they sound terrible?
The content was there, but the tech was...
The TDO forced us to kind of get our tech ducks in a row. Although, of course, that also led to, like, the lowest point in my career, which was not being able to name more than 4 operas by handle.
Okay, so it occurred to me when I was thinking about this episode. I'm like, we're going to send off George, give him a heartfelt goodbye. And I was thinking of all the bits we've done over the years with George, and this handle bit keeps recurring. And
It's never not funny.
The
It's never not
viewership,
funny.
the viewership of the Dallas Opera filmed episodes was so low. I think there is a very high chance that most of our listeners don't actually understand this bit. So let me explain. When we were on the Dallas Opera Network, we were contractually obligated to put out a film version, a Zoom video version, basically, of every episode we did. And when we were canceled, we had basically 1 or 2 more episodes left. And so we decided to go out with essentially a game of opera trivia horse, where we would attempt to make a basket, and then we would ask the person who made the basket to answer an opera trivia question. And I believe it was Oliver who asked George to name 5-handle operas, thinking it was a low ball, an easy one. And we saw George fall apart in real time.
Messiah?
He was naming oratorios. He was like staring off into the distance. Oliver was like personally offended that his Baroque era was not being respected by George Cedarquist.
I was heaving in the corner. I was laughing so hard.
It was great. Oh man, I want to. Maybe I can pull up and we can show that again on our website at some point, so people could admire that whole competition. Oliver Camacho did win, unfortunately for the rest of humanity.
So
but
he won fair and square.
It birthed a great bit.
It was very strange.
He won fair and
Yeah.
square. Yeah. The other running joke, of course, on the show is everyone saying drink, and I can't remember if who started as Oliver or Tobias, maybe, possibly, but why? Like, why are you guys saying drink? Let me in on the joke.
Because sometimes
Wait, you don't know?
He's been sober this whole time.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like you've had interesting experiences in our industry leading up to,
It's very non-committal of you.
Well, you know everybody.
Yeah.
You've been to all the great
You
houses of
kind of
Europe.
do.
You know,
you spent some of your adolescence in England. Was it
Right,
adolescence?
true. Yeah.
So you have these stories about England that make you sound way more international than your handle knowledge would betray. And then you also worked in Germany, or you did a stage. You did a stage in Germany?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those two experiences somehow make it sound like you've had like this jet-setting.
And so if we take a drink every time one of those experiences of your vast portfolio is mentioned, we're all going to be face down, hindquarters up.
This is not a joke. I have had to edit out references to times where George was reminiscing about someone we'd had on the show before who had actually never been on the show before because he actually just worked with them on a project.
They just did.
And I have to edit those out regularly.
Oh my goodness. Do you know, I love my stats. I love my numbers, and I love looking at opera numbers and sports operas. Ashley, you gotta have some stats for me.
In honor of your love of the stats and in honor of your great ascendance to that executive producer role in the sky, I went back and did a little number crunching just between you and me. This moment is just for us. I went back and counted the number of emails that have both of us on them from my beginning of my time on OBS in 2019. There are 984 message threads between you and me and some semblance of folks for OBS.
It's more than I write to my mother. That's crazy.
Yeah, well, call me. Nope, don't call me anything. And then we have a lot of interesting arrangements of people on the show because, with this 5 people, some people are all here, some people aren't here. Everybody can kind of come and go as they. That's the beauty of it. And there, between you and I together on the air, there are 76 shows.
What? Wow.
Between you and me, over the however many seasons you and I have been doing this together, there are 76 shows. And then 2 little pieces of trivia that I just wanted to mention. The very first time that I was supposed to be at the studio with you all for WNUR to do a recorded interview was the day I got hit by a car. I had to cancel my very first fun thing that I was so excited about with you guys because I caught air from a Honda Civic earlier that day. But then shortly after that, a few weeks later, I held it on crutches and everything was great. And I will never forget one of my interactions with George, and it was really just a look that I had with George when I knew I was in the right place. Again, when George and Oliver were pitching this show to me, you talked about sort of the reasons behind it coming to fruition and these 2 things that you love coming together. But for me, what the brilliance of the show was and is that the worlds of sports and the worlds of opera are actually run really similarly. Right. From, the rookie, the farm teams all the way up to the majors, rebuilding years. Everything changes when you get a new head coach, when you get a new star player. And so those overlaps and that sort of intersection was something that was so fascinating to me, which is why I was so delighted and flattered when you both invited me to come and do this. But
didn't you work on an opera together? Like way before?
Literally a decade before. Because I looked that up in my emails as well. 2009, you and I did a quick version of No Exit together. I was stepping in for somebody who had sung it previously, but you and I worked on No Exit for like a hot second. That music was so hard, but oh my God, I'm so glad we did it. And then 10 years later, I was here. But what I remember is when I did finally come into the studio and I was having a conversation with all of you, we were recording live, somebody mentioned something about Domingo before we knew as much as we know about Domingo now. And we were speaking and having a conversation about his move from the tenor repertoire to some lower repertoire based on his advanced age, his advanced career status. And knowing the sort of idea and theme of the show, I was like, oh yeah, it's like when Michael Jordan tried to play baseball. And George's head snapped and like turned and looked at me. And like we locked eyes. And he had such a whimsy and delight in his face. And I'm like, got it. That's what we're doing here. Okay, we got it. We got it. So
no, I mean, Ashley is more the show than any of us are. So it's gonna be hard to replace you, George.
It's about the Transformer look, though, right? It's like this crew and all the different configurations brings on different skills and different foibles and different jokes and different insights. It's always been about this compilation of opinions and people, whether it's sporty or more opera-y. It's always been about that combo. I want to make sure Matt gets a chance to take me down a peg or two. So, Matt, lay it on us.
George. I can't say I'm ready to say goodbye, but are we ever? Who would have thought that we'd still be here after all this time? It has been such a pleasure and truly an honor getting to know you over our 6 years doing this show together. Your inimitable intelligence, your fierce wit, your absolute allergy to learning more than 4-handle operas at a time, and of course, your willingness to be razzed a little bit to keep a good bit going. You're basically the Nick Fury of opera podcasting, or the Abraham Lincoln with this team of rivals you've assembled. Are those topical references in the year 2024? Does having a bad apple, like enemy of the show Tobias Wright, in the mix spoil your record? Who can say for either of those questions? It's certainly not for me to weigh in. We all make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn, and I have definitely learned a ton from working with you. Will we be able to talk about any sports besides tennis and the Olympics with you gone from our slate of hosts? That obviously doesn't apply to Ashley, but Weston, you and I'll put us on blast. Will anyone think of the directors? Will someone else have to move to Europe so our listeners don't think we've all become teetotalers? These are the questions that no one is asking. Or maybe you did ask. I don't know. Couldn't have been there, unfortunately. But I just want to say that I am so impressed by everything you've been able to do with this show and how eagerly you've shared the project with each and every one of your collaborators. Even Oliver, though I know that can be challenging at times. But you've just created an environment where no one's ideas are unwelcome, and your excitement at proposals for segments or topics or even points in discussion live on the air is just so infectious that it without a doubt makes them all better and has made the show better. We're all just going to have to pitch in to make sure that no one talks too fast or uses too much industry jargon or monologues for too long at a time in memory of your vision for the show going forward, because it definitely makes for a better show. I might even have to come back and join a panel in person again. We'll see. No promises. But I can say with absolute certainty that there would not be an Opera Box Score without George Cedarquist. Your perspective is so valuable, your passion is unmatched, and it's just not going to be the same without you behind that mic. I'm going to miss you, man, and so's the rest of the show.
Assuming that Matt did lay it on us. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
Matt. And I guess we're out of time here, but Weston made a reference earlier to the lost Jake Heggie episode. We actually had an interview with Jake Heggie that was very good about Moby Dick when Moby Dick was being presented by Chicago Opera Theater. And that was during our time at WNUR. And what happened? Something like just... it all went to crap. I don't know what happened. Did it go out live, but didn't go?
It went out live.
Okay.
I got an email from you, George, like, oh no. I think it was in the studio. We realized it hadn't recorded. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then and then George was like, you were like, oh, it's fine. I'll just email the guy who runs the station, and that they have a backup of everything. And then what did you find out, George, with that response email?
It was static or something. I mean, so yes.
It had been off for like 3 months.
It is, yeah, the backup. So it truly was this lost episode where, like, if you were listening on terrestrial radio on the low end of the dial, you would hear it. And then we wrote to Jake. We were like, we blew it. And he was like, I can't come back. I'm sorry. Yeah. Which was a totally legit thing to say.
Yeah, no, of course. And back then, that was a huge get for us. Now, we don't need Jake.
It's Jake's team, if you're listening, we need you. We always need you.
Not beyond
Please
Jake,
never forget us. Or do you like baked goods? You want cookies? I'll make those if he comes back.
I will leave you with this, is that I do think that the guests that we, specifically Oliver, rounds up for this show is utterly phenomenal. I mean, talk about punching
100%.
above your weight. What you are able to pull in on this show week in and week out is nothing short of exceptional. And that's really, that's something I never really saw this show going. I mean, back in the day, like I was hopping on people like Stuart Copeland. Do you remember the drummer from The Police who wrote that opera, The Invention of Morel, that was at Chicago Opera Theater? Like I remember interviewing him backstage at the Studebaker and thinking, well, this is probably as good as it's going to get, quite frankly. And look at us now. So to our listeners, obviously, thanks for sticking around with us all these years. The party continues. Season 10 this is the beginning. This is not the end. And to these 4 people, Oliver, Matt, Weston, and Ashley, it has been an utter thrill and an utter pleasure to make art and to talk about this art form that we know and love so much.
Drink!
Free throw.
This weekend, Javier Camarena makes his debut with Lyric Opera Chicago singing The Duke in Rigoletto, featuring friend of the show Mane Galoyan as Gilda. I had a chance to interview Javier for my other job, which you can still find on the archive at wfmt.com/listen. That's listening to singers from last weekend. And I had a little extra time with Javier as we were warming up for the interview and wanted to ask him how he felt about this point in his career after singing bel canto for 20 years, graduating into roles like the Duke. How does it feel to make this pivot in your career where you have to give up some of the stuff that people just love to hear you sing these things because it makes everybody happy? Now you got to be the jerk, who like throws Lucia on the ground, this type of thing, Yeah. Have you felt it in your own singing? Like less coloratura, less happy, more,
less coloratura makes me happy. A lot.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I still enjoy music a lot, and all what I can express through it. That's the joyful part for me. Yes, it's different character, it's different personality, and I don't know, operas like Rigoletto, it allowed me to be the bad guy.
Yeah. But he's a happy guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's a jerk, but
yeah.
I mean, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's another kind of fun. And, in this is I think it's my 5th, maybe, Rigoletto. It's not an opera I have performed so much. But this is the first time that I will play the Duke, not really like the incarnation of the evil,
Okay.
It's more like he knows he's powerful. He enjoys being powerful. He enjoys to have power over people and over women most of all. But it's at the end for him it's a game,
okay.
So he plays. It's joyful. And if we go to the Ruth, which is the king has fun, the Le Roi s'amuse from Victor Hugo.
Yeah,
it is that I think the proper essence of the character. So it's another kind of joy.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end, also, as you mentioned, Edgardo, for example. Edgardo, he's tormented by his past, but what motivates him to be sometimes really like, what the hell are you thinking?
Yeah,
it's just the love he feels for Lucia.
Have you had a chance to do Alfredo yet?
I did.
Okay.
I did my debut last year.
Okay.
At Monte Carlo.
So this for me is a turning point for a bel canto singer.
Yeah.
To have to sing ogni sua that part, This is hard. Like I feel like there's so much anger, and your voice has so much brightness and so much like sunshine, but you have to find this quality that sounds pissed off, And I think of Rolando Villas. I don't know if you saw this one, that he did with Anna Netrebko in Salzburg when they did the Willie Decker production.
Yeah. The one from Salzburg.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
He just rips his voice. Like and I don't know how he does it. I don't know why he does it, but it's so powerful. And like you hear it even 20 years later that it was recorded and you still feel the emotion because it was so intense.
Yeah. But this part. I mean, I completely understand, and it's fascinating to see Rolando in these roles, and actually enjoy all these like absolutely abandoned himself to the emotion.
Yeah.
But this part is where you have to be, as a singer, wise enough to have the control and the proper balance between the technique and the possibilities of your voice, and adjust that part to the situation.
Yeah.
That I think that, let's say, school I learned it from bel canto roles.
Yeah.
Actually. Even in Rossini, we know Rossini for the fun music, Barbiere, Cenerentola, La Scala di Seta, L'Italiano in Algeri, Contori. But Rossini, in his time, he was more famous because of his dramatic roles than the buffo, the comedies. And then in Rossini, you need to you can't forget technique.
Yeah.
And the emotion is conducted by the coloratura itself.
Yeah.
So you adjust the emotion to that musical specific part. And also in bel canto, there's not so much in the common roles we know. You mentioned that Lucia, and Lucia is one of those. And we have this part of Hai tradito il cielo e amor male. I know we have these amazing, beautiful references from the tenors from the beginnings of the last century. We have these big voices like Di Stefano and all these singers who approach the bel canto roles coming from the verismo roles they were
going
playing at the moment,
as opposed to thinking
almost
about
at the moment, So I think that the bel canto repertoire, it was a little bit not well treated. Nowadays we have amazing bel canto singers. We have Juan Diego, we have Lawrence Brownlee, we have so many
Jack
others.
Swanson. Have you heard Jack?
This young tenor also. Trying to be much more respectful of the style that really is like demanding the most pure and accurate technique, because what Donizetti wrote in that page, what I was mentioning from Lucia, we have a piano that goes to a crescendo, and then we have a forte piano. Because even if Edgardo is like really absolutely anger and he wants to throw everything away, even Lucia, he still holds back, because it's this fight between the hate and the love that he feels for her, because he just feels betrayed. So we have Hai tradito il cielo e amor maledetto, and it's almost like goes between, struggles to say the words. And we have all these dynamics marked by Donizetti. So that is a very good school to really be aware of how to manage emotions through the music and never lose this possibility of control.
And the bel canto composers understood this.
Yeah.
And, Verdi was a bel canto composer, but he keeps stretching the possibility.
Yeah, because I think Verdi was the main link already between Romanticism and Verism. And And he made all these changes already, also in the musical structure.
And putting the orchestra underneath you.
Yes. Even if he can be very simple with the chun, chan, 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 with the caballetas or the chun, chan, chan, chun, chan. We hear that a lot. But places the voice in a much more dramatic and demanding part of give more power.
Yeah.
Because emotions are more strong, like you were mentioning Traviata, Also, now in Rigoletto, we have Ella mi fu rapita, which is the most dramatic part for the Duke. But then I remember Araiza, who was my teacher, my professor for quite a long time. When we worked this, I worked this role with him, and he said, you just have to think about the Duke as a Mozart role, and keep it in that idea
clean,
and technically clean.
Yeah.
And don't break that part, because if not, it will
the drama will take you the wrong direction.
The drama will take you, yes. Yeah. So it's a matter of balance. And
are you friends with Freddie DiTommaso by any chance?
No, okay. I have not the pleasure of
I
him personally.
I interviewed Freddie last year when he was singing Tosca and Santa Fe. But he said to me that Verdi is the hardest thing he sings because it requires him to be technically clean, and he's known for these powerful, but when he sings Verdi, he has to rein it in.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And I am in that same position, that same position now, but I mean,
but you're coming from
let's say a level down, because now, I mean, it's already 20 years of career for me. So also the voice evolves, with time and changes and changing color and in weight and in many, many, many ways, and the feeling also it's different. It's not something that colleagues normally speaks openly. But I think it happens, And now as I go into this repertoire with Verdi, and I'm trying to go to more French also lyric repertoire. I feel this kind of much more freedom, and now that I'm trying to come back sometimes to the bel canto repertoire, I feel that same thing, that I have to really try to keep the voice more
lean.
Yes. But I mean, I still enjoy. I just sang La Cenerentola in the Teatro Liceu in Barcelona. And I sang also La Filrogemont in Monte Carlo. It was a challenge to come back to those, but I still enjoy so much.
From the 2017 production of Rigoletto from Gran Teatro del Liceo, we heard Javier Camarena singing the Cabaletta to Farmi veder le lagrime, conducted by Riccardo Frizza. Thanks to Michael Solomon of Lyric Opera of Chicago for connecting me with Javier Camarena.
A little bit of sports talk. in the show at this point. Ashley, so wait, the Bears?
I believe it's duh Bears, George.
I said this a couple of episodes ago because they were undefeated in the preseason, and I was like, we got to hold on to this while it lasts. Turns out it's going to last another week because they won on Sunday. But more importantly, just a moment of pause and silence and sadness, or praise and technicality, depending on which way you look at it, for that Ravens-Chiefs game on, was it Thursday?
Yeah.
It was Thursday. Man, watching that toe just like gently grace the line on that incredible catch was heartbreaking. It was a really heartbreaking thing to see.
Fantasy football update. So the OBS is part of Opera Philadelphia's Fantasy Football League again.
Now with two people no longer on the air with us, but go on.
It's true. Well, Tobias is out actually. So yours truly is driving the OBS. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, we're really screwed now.
Is what you would be saying if I didn't actually read a Wikipedia entry on how to run a fantasy football team. And we won our first game by 0.26 of a point.
Hot.
So by a quarter of a point, the OBS team currently 1-0. I took a lot of flack from the Opera Philadelphia people when we were doing the fantasy football draft. I'll have you know, but I stood tall and I picked Detroit Lions quarterback Jared Goff as one of my people.
Ooh,
to which Frank Luzzi said, that's either going to go down in like Opera Philadelphia lore as the most boneheaded thing ever to happen or utter genius.
We'll find out.
We'll find out what's next too in the 2-minute drill.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Angela Gheorghiu was booed by a Korean audience after stopping a performance of Tosca, Cold, as tenor Alfred Kim attempted to sing the encore of E Lucevan le Stelle. Gheorghiu berated the conductor Ji Jong-bae, saying, "Excuse me, it's a performance. It's not a recital. Respect me." An official from the Sejong Center for the Performing Arts said, "We have officially filed a complaint with her management and have formally requested an apology and are looking into precedents in other countries to inform our response." Gheorghiu's management has responded. More after the drill.
In labor news, San Francisco Opera Orchestra was granted a last-minute contract extension, literally moments before their opening night performance of In Ballo and Maschera last week. While this is not the longer-term contract that our members deserve, the extension agreement contains mutual aspirations of musicians and management to negotiate a multi-year contract, which they'd previously refused to consider, the orchestra said in a statement.
Meanwhile, a strike at La Fenice in Venice canceled the opening at night performance of Turandot there, and union orchestra members of Welsh National Opera said they would wear campaign shirts and distribute leaflets to the audience on their opening night of Rigoletto rather than strike outright.
The Bayreuth Festival has announced that it plans to downsize its chorus due to ongoing financial difficulties. The 134-person chorus, 80 of which are full-time, will be dissolved and replaced by a 115-person ensemble with an unspecified number of full-timers. Current members will have to re-audition to be in the new ensemble.
In an update to a story from Season 9 of the OBS, production team of Un Ballo and Maschera at Slovak National Theatre is protesting the Ministry of Culture's recent decision to fire General Manager Matej Durlichka. It is with heavy hearts that we share the decision to withdraw our concept, designers, and participation in the production following the unconscionable actions of Slovak's Minister of Culture, said the team in an open letter. We will not lend our names to legitimize the new bureaucratic management of the theater and allow for opera to be trumped by politics yet again.
John Elliott Gardner seemed to be disappearing after punching a singer last year and giving up his position as the head of the Monteverdi Choir and Orchestra this summer. But a few days ago, he announced that he's founding a new orchestra and choir from scratch. Quote, "It gives me great pleasure to announce the foundation of Springhead Constellation Chorus and Orchestra," Gardner said. "I made clear when I parted company with the MCO that I was not in any sense ready to retire." No word on what sort of workman's comp the new group will offer its members.
Last week, Teatro alla Scala premiered a brand new subtitle system consisting of 1,944 8-inch touchscreen tablets that are able to provide translations for each performance in up to 8 languages. The previous system, installed in 2004, could only accommodate a mere 2 languages. Each tablet includes a polarized filter to limit light leakage into neighboring seats.
The Met premiere of Grounded by Janine Tesori and George Brandt has been undergoing revisions since its 2023 premiere at Washington National Opera. In a New York Times article, the composer and librettist said they've spent the past year making substantial revisions that, among other things, bring the running time down by about 45 minutes.
Time for some major awards. Friend of the show, Carrie Lynn Wilson, has received the Ukrainian Order of Princess Olga from President Zelensky for founding the Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra and advocating for the country during its ongoing war with Russia. Meanwhile, Lithuanian soprano Aspik Grigorian has snagged the 2024 Austrian Music Theatre Prize for her, quote, emotional depth, technical brilliance, and fascinating stage presence.
In trade news, 3 leaders take a bow. Martin Perlman, founder and music director of Boston Baroque, has announced that the upcoming season will be his last leading the ensemble. Joe Davies has stepped down as Opera Australia artistic director, following conflicts over how the company should balance artistic innovation, audience development, and commercial imperatives. Finally, conductor Konstantin Orbelian has been promoted to executive director of New York City Opera, which hasn't staged a performance since 2022. Orbelian expressed optimism that he would be able to resurrect the beleaguered company with plans to stage William Grant Still's Troubled Island in 2025 or 2026. And bonus trade news, the Maryland Opera has announced the appointment of its new general director, Jason Buckwalter.
Crunching the numbers, the UK-based Musicians Union has released a new study that reveals the impact of Brexit on touring in the EU, and it's not good. 75% of respondents said that their bookings in the EU had declined, and 59% reported that EU tours were no longer financially viable due to increased costs and complications with taxes and fees. The Musicians Union did express optimism that the new Labour government might be more willing to address some of these issues compared to the previous one.
On the disabled list, Jonas Kaufmann is out for the LA Phil concert with Gustavo Dudamel at the Hollywood Bowl, slated for tomorrow. The news comes as the tenor postpones his concert with the Slovak Philharmonic earlier this week. Diana Damrau will now perform with the Phil.
Exit stage right. Tenor Ben Thapa, best known for the British quartet G4, has died at the age of 42. Thapa formed G4 with fellow Guildhall students in 2004. He left in 2018 to pursue his solo career and made his main stage debut at English National Opera in 2020. Thapa created the roles of Dr. Anton and Salieri as part of the production of Paradise Files for Grae Theatre Company, and performed the role of Conan in the new opera Morrigan.
American soprano Christine Wiedinger has died. Wiedinger won first prize in the Metropolitan Opera auditions, earning a contract at the Met where she sang regularly for 4 years before opting to move to Europe. From 1976 until 1990, she was a resident artist in Germany.
Howard Crook has died at 77. The New Jersey-born lyric tenor worked in theater and mime before becoming a professional singer specializing in Baroque and early music, including pioneering performances of works by Bach, Rameau, Lully, Haydn, and Mozart.
Siegfried Lorenz, a German baritone celebrated for his interpretations of Schubert and Bach, has died at the age of 78. Lorenz joined the Berlin Staatsoper in 1978, his debut as Wolfram in Tannhäuser. Lorenz's position at the Staatsoper later became a victim of post-reunification budget cuts. Therefore, he shunned the limelight, living modestly in the eastern part of Berlin, teaching singers at the University of the Arts, and making only rare professional appearances.
And on this day, September 11th, in 1693, was the first performance of Henri Desmarais' Didon in Paris. In 1766, Franz Joseph Haydn's La Canterina premiered in Bratislava. 1899 saw the first performance of Victor Herbert's Cyrano de Bergerac in Montreal, and in 1909, his revised version of the Rose of Algeria premiered in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. That same year, 1909, was the first performance of Baron Frederick Alfred d'Erlanger's Bacchus Triomphant in Bordeaux.
Yes.
1951 was the first performance of Stravinsky's opera The Rake's Progress at La Fenice in Venice, conducted by the composer. In 1764, Italian composer Valentino Fioravanti was born in Rome. In 1825, the Viennese music critic and Wagner hater Eduard Hanslick was born in Prague. Here's a weird one. 1840, Robert Schumann gave Clara Wieck, his fiancée, his newest song cycle, Liederkreis, on poems of Joseph von Eichendorff. It was a engagement gift, and it's not opera, but it's a great story. In 1850, P.T. Barnum introduced Swedish soprano Jenny Lind to American audiences, paying her $1,000 per engagement. I will take that in 2024.
I'd like that now.
In 1888, American soprano Rachel Morton was born in Webster, Mass. In 1897, it was the birth of Swedish baritone Lars Larson. Never heard of him, but he's got a great name. In 1911, American mezzo-soprano Alice Tully was born to a wealthy family in Corning, New York. I feel like that's a Gilded Age story probably coming up. In 1929, it was the birth of American soprano Margaret Tynes in Virginia. In 1930, Australian-based Clifford Grant was born. And happy birthday to English soprano Catherine Bott, born this day, September 11th, in 1952 in Leamington Spa.
That's your 2-minute drill. Just a little bit of Christina Wiedinger singing the cabaletta that concludes Anna Bolena by Donizetti with the Polish Radio Symphony Orchestra conducted by Richard Bonning. Lots of sad obituaries in today's drill. Definitely.
The Ben Thapa story is sort of a gut punch. 42, that's younger than... I know a lot of ages are younger than me, but that's younger than me. So.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at least you can be buoyed by the fact that it's Eduard Hanslick Day for all you Wagner haters out there.
Phew.
Also, what's the story behind this Liederkreis thing?
Okay. This is the strangest thing. So it's, I think it's a 12-song cycle. Nobody can sing it. I mean, they're all bops. But if you look at the range of this thing, it's like, who can sing this besides Krista Ludwig? Like it's high and it's low and it's really low. And there's lots of encoded messages in it, like how there was this time in romantic music where they were like spelling words, with keys, like,
right. Yeah, classic.
Yeah. Classic German. There are lots of little messages to Clara throughout this piece, mostly marriage. Ehe is a word that you find in some of the songs. And the subject matter is so bizarre. Like there's Lorelei story, somebody getting dragged into the forest, by the Lorelei. There's
romantic.
Yeah. There's a song about a knight in a castle that's basically like dying of old age and like just by himself. A bride crying, hide your children. I poop you not. It's like hide your children is one of the songs. Like, keep your loved ones safe,
I mean, if that doesn't make you want to shack up, I don't know what does.
Yeah, no, it's so grim fairy tale type of like dark German stuff. And it's like, this is what you're going to give Clara Wieck as a wedding gift. It's so creepy. Weird. And we would find out later on that, Robert Schumann was actually, I don't know if it's like some kind of poisoning or something like that, but he went nuts, So, anyway, I love that song cycle. It is so strange. And, happy wedding gift,
That is crazy. It's crazier than, Gheorghiu's antics.
Boom! Transition.
Well,
we now have a statement from her management.
All right, give us a statement.
Intermusica, I believe, is her firm. I'll give you some of the highlights. Ms. Gheorghiu deeply regrets the circumstances which led to the incident. Here's the backstory. Context matters, people. It was agreed and confirmed with the conductor in advance that there would be no encores made by any of the performers. Apparently, she believes firmly that encores outside of a concert performance setting disrupt the narrative flow of the opera. So then what happened, and she saw that as a personal affront, given her strong convictions on the matter. Angela wishes to express her profound respect and love for Korean audiences. We've been particularly concerned with the extraordinary level of abuse she has been subjected to online, exacerbated by incomplete media reports on the incident. So they're wanting to get out there that this was agreed upon ahead of time. No encores. Okay.
Well, this isn't the first time she's done.
Yeah. Remember when she walked out after the Kaufman encore? She didn't even finish the damn show.
It's such an on-brand thing for her to do. Now, I will say, as I am not a fan of Eduard Hanslick, which means I love me some continuous melody and some continuous drama. And, I do, I am, when I'm going to the opera, I don't prefer to see encores either. Same. However, to stop someone in the middle of an encore, it feels nasty. It puts a bad taste in everybody's mouth, because I could see afterwards being like, right. Hey, can we not do this? And if they did, beforehand say, hey, we're not doing this, maybe they said that, who knows? It really ruined the sort of the performance, I think, for a lot of people. And there was definitely segments of, people in Korea. I mean, she doesn't go to Korea all the time. And a lot of the people who had been going there for her, excited to see her. I saw some online reactions that suggested it might even be insulting to specifically her Korean audiences, because that's more encores are a little bit more acceptable there than in some other places.
Well, and the singer in question was local, right? He was Korean.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I mean, that's
the optics are bad.
It's very bad.
The optics are bad, and also the choice of words that were reported to have been used when she confronted the conductor. The idea that this disrupts the narrative, that's all fine and good for you to say afterwards, management company, but she actually used the words respect me. So she made it about her. She didn't make it about the art. She didn't make it about the narrative. It's like, tell me this is about you without telling me this is about you. Oh, just kidding. You said respect me. So
I'll tell you what disrupts a narrative more than an encore is storming out on stage and making the orchestra stop playing.
Exactly. Yeah, we do want continuous narrative. I'm not a huge fan of the sort of spur of the moment encore, but it reminds me of the early days under NFL commish Roger Goodell, right? When NFL used to stand for No Fun League because players couldn't celebrate in the end zone after they scored touchdowns. And the whole point was remember Ocho Cinco, get your popcorn ready? Or was it Terrell Owens? But it was that's the whole reason we go, right? We want to see touchdowns. We want to see athleticism. We want to see those guys in pro football. They are men. We want to see them celebrate. It's the same way in opera. We want to be there in that house. And it's oh my gosh, we got an encore. It's special. It's unique. I mean, we should probably, if not make space for that, at least have those conversations in the wings.
I think we have to extend some grace, because maybe she was trying to say respect Puccini, but it sounded like respect me. Respect Puccini. Respect
me.
Sure.
That's the sort of argument John Elliott Gardner made. Was I was just reaching for the pepper. He got in the way. He got in the way.
God. I mean, well, it's, it's kind of funny because I think it was literally the last show we did, because we didn't do.
We skipped Labor Day
last week. Yeah. But we had a whole discussion about how he's he seems to be really pulling out, really settling into retirement.
Yeah. Set out to pasture. Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, it's I'm creating Monteverdi Choir Part 2.
Yeah.
And, I do think that his statements have expressed, what I think is genuine regret over what he did. But also, I think at a certain point, you just got to, you can't really come back from punching someone on purpose twice. And I don't think you should try, even if you feel bad, even if you feel sorry. Just let someone else do it. You pull a George Cedarquist, become an executive producer where you throw a bunch of money at the next ensemble.
Just
that
be
comes
grateful
by to
that it's
replace
not
you.
called Springhead Constellation. I mean, if that is not the most pretentious title, but Ashley, I digress.
I mean, my one comment is I can't wait to see what sort of hands-on approach he takes with his leadership to this new ensemble. You know, no, not at all. It'll never be too soon. I'll say it again and again. What it reminds, and it seems like this ensemble is going to be a lot like his old one. So it's kind of like when Kanye got divorced from Kim Kardashian, and then he married Bianca Censori, who now looks, I don't know, checks notes exactly like Kim Kardashian did when Kanye was married to her.
Yeah. I mean, they're booked for 5 shows on the continent in Europe already. So obviously those Brexit margins not hurting John Elliott Gardner.
Well, that's just it. That's just it. Before we go to Bayreuth, it's on the audiences and it's on the presenters who are
You're right.
Still fascinated by this artist and feel like there's tickets to be sold with that name, you know? Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of people who can't have careers in the US because they were ostensibly canceled, who are doing just fine abroad. Maybe even running
maybe alliterative singers' names that we won't mention.
he could not have, put together a whole chorus and orchestra without a lot of people being really on board, so I think it's once again a place where maybe administrators should be doing a little bit better.
We'll talk about this again 9 months from now. Something will have happened. We'll be talking about it again.
And now Bayreuth suffering, Opera Australia suffering, Nico suffering.
Nico maybe not suffering.
No.
Maybe not.
There's no way. There's no. If there's one thing I'd leave this show with, it's good. Nico, it will never return. It's just.
I mean, I was looking at the article, and I was surprised that they still had a staff, but they've been apparently working for the past couple years to try to fill in that hole. I think they're $2 million something in debt.
Insurmountable.
Yeah, and it's, I do think it's possible for them to be pulled out of it, but I think the people that could pull them out of it already made the decision to let it die when they let it die the first time. I would love to see it come back. I think New York City Opera is in a lot of ways the kind of company that needs to exist in
absolutely
in New York City or in the world. I think when it went, the fact that there was now, obviously there are more small companies and storefront stuff in New York City.
But here's what Nico did. It was at their level. Their aesthetics, their progressive aesthetics, kept the Met honest. It forced the Met to do more non-traditional work. And the Met, to its credit, in Nico's vacuum, has already filled that aesthetic gap in its own programming. So, Nico, there's really no need for it anymore because the Met is already doing that more progressive work by choice. To
some extent, yes. I do think that the Met is doing it almost out of necessity because they see it as we need to be doing new, edgier works just to make ends meet. Having a company that makes those choices for aesthetic reasons, for principles beyond just it's what's making money right now, I think is very important. They called it the People's Opera for a reason, it was...
Yeah. A Met show will never replace a City Opera show in terms of the way that things are approached in direction and stylism in all of these different ways. I got to see Flavio. Where else would I see not at the Met? I'm not going to get to see Flavio at the Met, but I got to see it at City Opera. And listeners in America, if you want to help that cause and you happen to be in New York City, you can go to the City Opera thrift shop, which is still running, which is still open and has been for 40 years and has an incredible selection. If you want excellent thrift shopping in New York, you go to City Opera Thrift.
Amazing.
Ashley, you got to see Grounded.
I sure did. There was that piece in the New York Times that spoke on sort of the updating, the trimming, the adjustment of new opera.
45 minutes of trimming.
You know, my gut reaction to that was yes, if it's off Act 2. It's really hard for me to imagine any spot in Act 1 where they'd really be able to pull out significant chunks of the music or the narrative. There were definitely some... I should stand on business and say I loved this piece. I loved everything about it. I cannot wait to see what the Met does with it. But there were definitely some spots in Act 2 where I just sort of started to fall out of it. And usually for me, that's an indication that something's either gone on too long, or the point isn't coming across correctly, or they're just not engaging their audience. And I am one of the most willing audience. I'm willing to go along with anybody on any narrative. I'm like, yes, put it at me. So yeah, I'll be interested to see sort of what they trim. I do plan on finding a way to be over there to see it when it goes up at the Met. But yeah, for me, I don't know how they're going to get a lot out of Act 1. I think it's probably going to be out of Act 2.
Well, we will be trimming this show if we don't wrap things up.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. It's always a great way to end things. We're going to start with Oliver Camacho.
We will get to the International Opera Award nominees. Lots of friends of the show. We'll get to that next week, but I did want to let you know that friend of the show and love of Oliver's life, baritone Hugh Montague Rendell's album came out last week. It's called Contemplation. For all intents and purposes, it's his resume of roles he's already sung and roles he's going to sing soon, plus a nice serving of orchestrated art song, including the Mahler Wayfarer songs. I'm going to probably surprise everybody by saying that one of the best selections on this album was one I was ready to skip. Billy Bigelow's soliloquy from Carousel is on here. And if you, trying to figure out why am I all, ape poop over this singer, listen to him sing that. I mean, his attention to language, his tone quality, his, control of dynamics, it's all there in that, 8-minute aria. You call it an aria in MT? I don't know what you guys call it. Song.
They call it a show tune.
They call it a number.
Yeah. Number.
Weston Williams.
I have a bad call. It's, of course, that George is leaving us. But my good call is that I have a real estate opportunity for you, George. Okay. A retirement home opportunity, you will. The birthplace and childhood home of Benjamin Britten is now, as of recording, it is on the market. It is a seafront 10-bedroom a guest house somehow. I don't know. It's only £795,000, George. Yeah, so I'm sure you could just pull right from our OBS coffers, hop right over there. He was born there November 22nd, 1913, and it could be where George dies if he plays his cards right.
Ashley Hardgrave.
I echo the bad call on George's departure, but my good call this week is an article that is in the Minnesota Star Tribune that features a really cool company that has popped up in the area. It's Raison d'Etre Opera. It is an opera company for singers 55 and over. It's such a cool thing. It's just finished its first season, so they're about to open their second. They're going to be doing it with a 9-day residency from Frederico von Stade, who is 79 and is going to be doing a recital with Martin Katz sometime over the next week. But it goes into, so many singers, this is their raison d'etre. It's their reason for being, and roles tend to dry up for those who are in their 50s, especially their mid-50s and beyond. So having a company that is dedicated exclusively to those folks, even though it is not for someone like me yet, I love that it exists, and I'm really excited to see this company getting some additional press.
Good call from me in the New York Times. This is actually from the end of August. George, slow to the party as always. We'll put a link to the article on our website from the New York Times. Yuval Sharon writes not an op-ed. I think it's an excerpt from a longer piece that he wrote sort of about the future of opera. It's got his usual wit and insight, and he really talks about the edifice of the opera house, which is something I've always believed in, and how the opera house itself is potentially one of those barriers to the perception of opera as this elitist art form. Worth a read. That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Get your voice heard and find links to stuff we've talked about at the website, operaboxscore.com. And that's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS using the Support the Team tab. Your announcer is Norm Waddell. Your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. And your audio editor is Weston Williams. For co-host Matt Cummings and Ashley Hardgrave, with guest Javier Camarena, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera in a more behind-the-scenes, managery kind of way. Season 10 continues next week with an all-new show when we... Actually, wait. Who knows what's going to happen? I'm not going to be there. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and less George Cedarquist. Join us.